Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today we have another special episode recorded live in front of an audience for the second of the latest TwinTalks interview series hosted by Bentley Systems. Now, as with the first TwinTalks event with Construction Minister Sarah Jones, today's episode heads to Parliament for a conversation with Lee Pitcher, MP for Doncaster East and the Isle of Axholme, chair of the Party Parliamentary Group on Water, and, up until the general election in July, an engineering consultant with decades of experience in the water sector. And I reckon that makes him the ideal person to chat to today about the launch of a new white paper produced by Bentley Systems and water consultancy Aqua Consultants that focuses on creating sponge cities to tackle surface water flooding. And as the white paper points out, urbanisation, outdated drainage systems and climate change are compounding the issue. But solutions are at hand in the form of sustainable drainage systems, SUDs, green infrastructure solutions, and a range of new strategies to create cities, sponge cities, designed to absorb, store, and manage water more effectively. But of course, despite the obvious economic and social costs of inaction, we still seem to be struggling to embrace change. The question is why, and the question is how can we shape the future of sustainable water management? Well, Lee is a great person to ask, so I started by finding out why another report might help prompt the required change. Lee, you've served, as MP for Doncaster East and the Isle of Axholme since July, but before that you were fully embedded in the water sector, particularly in tackling urban flooding as Director of Water and Environment for Europe at Jacobs, and before that Head of Partnerships at Yorkshire Water. So I suppose the question is, why do we need another report like this? What's it all about?
Okay, so I think the reason we need reports like this, first and foremost, they have credibility. They are, we know that they've been produced and created based on experience and knowledge and intelligence from people that have worked in the industry. Mm-hmm. That's massively important because, politicians, we learn from sound bites. Mm-hmm. Yep, we don't always have the significant amount of detail behind it from the industry. So we need to learn from, the private sector, public sector. And actually what these reports do is give us a real insight into the true issues out there, but also the solutions. Right. And these reports, this one in particular, starts to provide solutions. Yeah.
So just to be very clear, creating sponge cities to tackle urban flooding. What is a sponge city then? So
a sponge city, how would I describe it? So for me, it's where you take a whole city landscape, you look at the water that's in that city or could fall on that city from the rainfall or come into it from rivers, ditches, dikes, all of those sorts of watercourses, and you look at the interventions you can make to absorb the water, to harvest the water, to convey it differently, but to basically help guide that water into a safe space. Right. That means it's collected up like a sponge, doesn't cause flooding, but also it means that there is water around when you do need it.
Right, yeah. I mean, you've written many papers when you're a water engineer. How does this report, I suppose, differ from things maybe you were involved in producing in the past?
I mean, there's 5 key recommendations for a start. So it's always nice to have something that's really tight and really focused. And these recommendations are absolutely that. They provide some solutions, which I think is massively important. And I'm sure we come on to some of that in a bit. But also, it has a sense of urgency this time. Yeah, it has when I read those recommendations, they have a sense of how do we expedite, how do we accelerate some of these things? And they are really clear about their ask in terms of, we need government to get behind these things and we need local government to get behind these things. Yeah. So I think it's, really tight, really clear, really focused on solutions, but the ask is clear. Yeah.
Interestingly, it also says we need the public to get behind them as well.
Yeah, for definite. So one of the things that I've absolutely learned from my time in the industry, but also from the 8 months that I've been an MP, is that there's no one that knows their area, their community, how it works, what makes people tick more than the person that lives there.
Right.
So if you want these solutions that we're thinking about, SUDs, for example, sustainable urban drainage, to coexist with us and to look after it and maintain it, you need your communities to buy into it. So massively important. Yeah.
good segue into talking about your career, because as I say, 8 months ago you were an engineer, now you're a politician. What's that baptism of fire been like? What have you been up to over the last 8 months?
I've got to say, it's like, it is the most surreal experience of my whole life. Yep. So in my maiden speech, which I did on the 18th of July, I remember that because it was on my birthday, I talked about the fact that I was born in London. I was born in the East End of London. But then when I was 15, I became homeless. And with my mum and sister, and for I think 13 or so months, maybe a bit more, we just lived in one room on a mattress. And that kind of sparked my, I suppose, my desire to do well for myself in terms of build a career. But it also, it ignited something inside that said that I'd like to do something alongside that to support and help people. So right away from my career in the water industry, I've worked with charities and looking at homelessness and areas of deprivation in particular. And I guess the two things, the skills that I've taken from building that career in the water industry, plus my life experience, have led me to say, well, a couple of years ago, I want to do something a bit more now and something a bit different, and that's why I went into politics.
Yeah. And it has been a baptism of fire, I imagine, because you've got to immediately set up an office. You've got to really get the infrastructure behind being a parliamentarian. Oh,
do you know what? It's unbelievable because obviously my constituency was made up of two previous sort of former constituencies that came together. There was no team therefore in place prior. I think within the first 4 minutes of on that July the 5th at about 4 a.m. in the morning, the first 4 minutes I got my first email requesting some support. I think it's something like within the 100 days I had 10,000 emails, which gives you a scale and an idea of scale and size. And you're on your own for a while, because you are in effect running a business, because you are setting up a team, you're recruiting, you're going through security, which is huge nowadays, as you can imagine. And it takes a little while to get over that hump. So there I am prioritising that list of things that I need to get on with straight away to help people. Yeah. So
on the one hand, I suppose when you're a water engineer, you're actually able to tackle some of those issues. You can actually do something about it in a technical way. I suppose as a parliamentarian, do you feel that you can do something about these issues in a more powerful way, or is it just a different way?
No, it's interesting, isn't it? Because as an engineer, you come up with practical solutions that you can implement. Yeah, and you can put your hands around it and you deliver that straight away. As a politician, you can come up with ideas that then you need to move into policy and legislation. Yeah, but I suppose the difference is that as an engineer, you do something that's kind of a one-off.
Right.
Whereas a politician, you have got this, unbelievable, and it is, it's an absolute privilege position where you can look at all of the issues that we've got out there, the challenges, and create something that has an umbrella effect that can make things change, make lives change, holistically. So you're not just impacting one person, you're supporting and helping thousands, millions.
Well, when I spoke to Mike Reeder, MP, who's also a former engineer, and also to Sarah Jones, the construction minister, we reflected on the fact that infrastructure and politics are intertwined. You can't really separate them. How has your experience helped you so far in that actual kind of policy making arena? Because that takes a long while. It's very difficult. And I suppose as a new parliamentarian, often I suppose it takes time for you to get your ideas in there. How do you go about it?
Well, I've come from a very much a business background, and I started on the front line. I was a sewer baiter. I used to lift manholes and bait the sewers to kill the rats, also to manage the rat population.
Oh, the glamour of it.
The glamour. And actually, it's bizarre because probably the one thing that I'm most scared of in life are rats. Oh, right. So thankfully, I've not seen any around Parliament. There's been plenty of mice.
But they definitely are around.
Are they?
I don't want to bring you down, but they're definitely around.
I'm not going to go there, but I do think that in my career I've had the unique opportunity of working frontline, and then I've built that in customer service, in regulation, in innovation, asset management. I've worked in pretty much every single area you can think of, and that knowledge, is just so important, particularly when I'm talking about water issues back in Parliament. But what I'd also say, it's those skills that you pick up in business, yeah? So what you absolutely learn is the importance of fast decision making, the importance of weighing up risks, but also being able to take risks, knowing that you can fail, but then pick it up and learn from it and make things happen. But fundamentally working across the best brains. If you get the best brains around you, that makes all of the difference. So working as a team is essential. And I take that straight back with me to Parliament, which is why I wanted to be the chair of the Party Parliamentary Group for water.
Right, yeah. Well, no, and I suppose getting involved in a report such as this is another way of getting those big brains behind you. Final bit about your own personal life. I suppose it must have changed quite a lot because you're now based quite a lot of the week down in London. You've got a family up in Doncaster.
I do.
How do you manage that?
Yeah, so it's a travel down on a Sunday night or Monday morning, and back home late on a Thursday night. I always stay for business questions and then try to do something in the chamber. Sometimes we have Friday sit-ins as well. So and then back of a weekend, I'm in the constituency. Yeah. So I mean, it's a vocation. Yeah, it's 7 days a week, but I did wait for my family to be older before I moved into this role. So my son's, he's 18, just passed his driving test. He's very independent. My daughter's even more independent. She's 14. Oh, right. To be honest. She pretty much steers us and drives us everywhere, even though she hasn't got a license. So but she's. What I would say is that the other big thing for me is that my wife, I've been with her for 30 years, since I was 18. And she's had an amazing career as well, but over those years she has lost her sight. Yep. So at each time her sight has got slightly worse, we've had to adapt. She's now got a white cane. Right. Eventually, probably have a guide dog. So for me, a lot of the stuff that I do is also about inclusivity. It is about equity. It's about how we give access, and some of the stuff that some of the stuff we talk about water. Is about equity across the globe in terms of water, but it is also about what it can mean to people if they're flooded, and particularly people with disabilities, and how do we prevent that happening.
Been supporting your wife and her sight loss and your action over homelessness. Have you got some targets that you're trying to achieve in your time as a parliamentarian?
I didn't put the connection together, did I, between the sort of my wife's disability and flooding? But that comes from in 2007. I'll come back to your question. Is that okay? In 2007, I was massively involved in the floods that happened in Hull and the East Riding and in South Yorkshire. And there was a gentleman then who was blind. His story just resonates with me, where that water was flowing into his house, the surface water absolutely flowing into his house. He couldn't see where it was coming from, of course. He couldn't tell the depth. He had to physically go kneel down to feel how deep that water was getting. He was then trying to judge where it would get to. Things were floating around him, and it's just the most traumatic, terrible experience. And I think that, with those things, my world of water and that world of being with Julie through her challenges, it kind of just resonated with me that there's something much more that we needed to do. So.
You're very busy.
Yeah, mega busy.
You've got a lot of fronts. You're operating a lot of fronts.
Mega busy, yeah.
Yeah, I know. But Mike Reader pointed out to me, he said the good thing about coming from an engineering background is he's used to being busy.
Yeah, it's true.
He said, unlike some of the others. Anyway, I won't get into that. Anyway, let's get back.
Who did he say? Who did he say?
He just mentioned a few. That's right. Anyway, let's get back to the report. It discusses, as you said, how climate change is increasing the frequency and severity of rainfall. Our existing urban drainage systems, are they fundamentally unfit for purpose?
So they were fit for when they were built, weren't they? It's a very political answer, that, isn't it? But it is. And, they have been added to over the years, but things have changed like exponentially over the last probably a couple of decades in particular. The amount of rainfall events that we get, of intense rainfall, has changed substantially. The population growth that we've had in certain areas has been huge. So of course, our systems are bursting at the seams. So if you look back at the Victorian era and what they put in there, and they oversized, they future-proofed, and that's held us in good stead. But we're at that position again where we need to do something radically different to cope.
Yeah, but of course, a lot of this comes down to local authorities, and the financial constraints on local authorities, they are highlighted in the report as a barrier. This is not going away. The Chancellor is under some pressure when it comes to balancing the books, and it's unlikely there's going to be much more new money available. In fact, the podcast this week is around problems in the local road system. I mean, what needs to change, in your view, to overcome this ongoing financial constraint, which is really holding back local government from delivering?
Yeah, so I mean, resilience and our future resilience as a country is the platform on which we need to build growth. Yeah, so we recognise that if you've got a risk of flooding, you have to do something about it in order to, I guess, give the confidence to business and to property owners that, wherever they build their business, they're going to be okay going forwards and away from the impact of flooding. So I accept there's huge amounts of challenges out there in terms of the finances, but we've actually put more money into flood resilience already as part of the budget. There's 1 billion in terms of building flood defences. There's more to come. But what I would say is that part of what we need to do is think very, very differently. So that, devolved powers is going to support that, because as we've already talked about, the fact is, if you know your area, you know where your risks are, you know where people and communities will engage and co-create with you, that in itself starts to become much more efficient in the way that you can deliver some of these solutions. Yeah. And the solutions that we're talking about, they're not necessarily building massive, they're not big tanks and big lakes. This is about doing stuff at a street level, at a domestic level. So, I think the funds are there. We just need to use them efficiently.
Yeah. And perhaps remove quite a lot of the centralised power and get those powers devolved.
A bit of both, actually. A bit of both. So I spoke in the chamber last night around the planning bill. Yeah. Modernising that bill, and this is a once in a generation kind of bill that will absolutely transform the planning system from end to end, and actually make it much more simple, much more efficient. The ability to build should be a lot easier. We've got a big target of building 1.5 million homes. What I would say is, when we do that, we absolutely need to be thinking about, well, how do you do that in a way that creates those homes at a really high quality, but they are flood resilient? Yeah.
Well, let's get into that. We talked about what a sponge city is. So when you think about those 1.5 million homes that are destined to be built, when you think about the 20 million homes that are already around us, what are some of the key design principles that you as a water engineer did by nature, and perhaps the future water engineers need to be embracing to really make sure that a city becomes more absorbent to the rain?
Yeah, okay. Is it easier with? It's probably easier when you've not built something already.
Right.
Yeah, as opposed to retrofit. So I'll talk about them separately, slightly, if that's okay. But in terms of new housing, new property, we need to think about the landscape. Yeah, you think about how you landscape the area around so that water is moved away from the properties. You need to be thinking about how do you support the people that live in those houses to think about water and the value of water, and that includes everything from rainwater harvesting and having appropriate rainwater collection so that that's stored and you can use that later, but it means it doesn't go into the sewer systems. You need to be thinking about what you can do in the broader catchment to protect and hold water back from the area. So that's everything from tree planting. It's around permeable paving on your front drive so that water can seep through instead of remaining stagnant on top of the or pond on top of the tiles. So lots of stuff that needs to be done. So that's new stuff. Retrofit is obviously then thinking about, well, actually, is there something we can do to these properties to help support them in the future? So property level flood resilience is one of the things that you can do for that.
Right. So on the one hand, it's putting in measures to make sure that if it does flood, the damage is lessened. On the other hand, it's making sure they don't get flooded to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know from a mental health point of view that if you have a plan for your house, I find this very strange. So my children, when they were doing the curriculum at school for PSHE, personal social health education, they come home and we had to look at the house. We had to look at how what happens if there's a fire at the house. I find it absolutely astonishing that in areas where we know there's a huge amount of flood risk, that children in those schools are not necessarily taught how to do a flood plan for their house.
Right.
And we know if there's a flood plan that you feel more prepared. By feeling more prepared, you can respond quicker. You can reduce the impact of flooding if it does happen, and then you bounce back quicker. That is great for your mental health. And we know that flooded children have it has a massive impact on their mental health forever. So it's stuff like that.
And I suppose getting kids involved basically ingrains that message to the public in a much more effective way.
It does, and and that education from a really, really young age also starts to help us with pipeline. We have a culture at the moment of, engineering has been the same for many, many decades. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about building big tanks. It's about building pumping stations. The engineering of the future is much more blue-green engineering. Mm-hmm. So it's working with nature, and we need more young adults coming into that profession with different ways of thinking, with ideas around how you can work with nature, with agriculture, to actually make a massive difference.
And you've referenced progress that's been made in Copenhagen and in New York. Tell me about those. What are they doing? What are those cities doing that the UK could copy?
Yeah, so if you look at Copenhagen, they've taken a huge expanse of land that was kind of called a park, but it was a big swampy piece of land, very much neglected for donkey's years actually. And what they've done there, they have created a kind of a river that goes down to a big lake. They've redesigned the whole of the place. It's got amenities on it. It's got a play park for children. So in essence, what that does, it helps to convey that water, if it does rain excessively, into a really safe space. But it massively helps the six capitals. So the social value of that is huge. Mm-hmm. So you've got something that protects the area, but in doing so, creates somewhere where people can go and have great leisure time, support with their mental health through walking, let the children, interact, play out, and it's just a lovely way of doing it. Yeah. And I can't understand why we don't do a lot more of it.
Because you're using that that problem as effectively as an asset.
Absolutely, and it makes all the difference. Yeah.
So. When we're looking at 1.5 million new homes, do you think that thinking that way is going to make it harder or make it easier to deliver? Because it's a big target already.
Yeah, it's a massive target, but it's but it is about thinking differently. And in order to achieve that target, we need to think differently.
Yeah.
We need to think about our supply chain, and in doing so, it is about injecting new ideas in terms of how we take things forward. And I guess that's what this government's about. It's about change, and it's about change for the better. The way that you do that is to help think differently and help people think differently. Yeah. So, but there are examples out there where it happens really, really well. So, and obviously I do declare an interest in this one because it was my project originally. But Living with Water over in Hull and East Riding.
This was Yorkshire Water.
It was with Yorkshire Water. But actually, I sat on the board at the time, so I actually worked for the Environment Agency, Yorkshire Water. The two local authorities, Hull and East Riding, and with Hull University. So it was actually that the way that we did that was to almost create an entity that just managed water. And the thinking that we had and how we went about that was to think, how do we manage water first? Forget what each of us has as targets within our individual organisations. Forget how it's funded generally within each of those organisations, but how do we just manage this water so that one person in that house doesn't have to go through the trauma of being flooded? And actually that did help ignite a really different way of thinking and a different culture.
That perhaps leads us to some of the recommendations of the white paper, because the report suggests water companies should take a more active role in flood prevention. Why would you say that they are well placed to lead on this issue?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? So if you think about a water company, it absolutely works with the resident at the property. It has to work at a street level. It has to work in a town, in a city, across the region, and then nationally as well. So if nothing else, I guess the water company does have that kind of holistic view.
Yeah.
They are also, they have a wealth of knowledge in the individuals that work there, but they also have a wealth of data, information that can be used through the models that they've collected over the years as well.
And are they currently sufficiently or correctly motivated to do that?
So I think So I'm going on not a political view here though. Yeah. So this is from my background. I never met one person when I worked at the water company that didn't care about the environment, and that's the truth. There were people, who would go out 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, to stop a pollution, to stop a flooding happen, to support and help somebody out of their home if they were flooded. So, you've got a whole collection of people who work in those organisations that are passionate about their jobs and want to make a difference. That's, fundamentally, that's really key. Yeah, that's the fundamental part of actually making change. So definitely, within the workforce, that's there. Within the regulatory regime, there's obviously a push to make sure that people work together collectively to resolve flooding in the future, particularly surface water flooding. So I think, the incentives are definitely there. The will is there.
But there's no question that regulation of the water sector is on the government's radar right now.
Oh, absolutely, and right, rightly so, and rightly so, and it has to be. So I guess now is the time to be able to influence, where we go in the future. So John Cunliffe's review, and with the Independent Water Commission, is way underway now. The consultation is out. People can feed into that, and some of the stuff that we talk about today. In fact, this paper needs to absolutely feed into that review. Yeah,
because in many ways it is ridiculous. In many ways it is sad, I suppose. That there is a call in the paper for implementation of Schedule 3 of the Flood and Water Management Act. This effectively establishes a framework for sustainable drainage systems, SUDS, requiring local authorities to act as SUDS approval bodies. We've been talking about this for many, many decades,
yep.
But it's not for lack of will or not lack of ideas. It simply comes down to who pays for it.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. But ultimately, whatever we build, it needs maintaining. So whether that's a SUD or sustainable urban drainage, or whether that is much more of a traditional kind of grey solution, it does need to be paid for and maintained. Yeah. So why that's challenging, I'm not 100% sure, but I guess it does come back, doesn't it, to policy?
Yeah.
It comes back to policy. It comes back to being really clear. And that is absolutely something that we need to feed into that review with Sir John Cunliffe.
Another recommendation is a proposed update to the SUDS manual. Some might say another one.
Yeah.
What's different about this update then?
I suppose the difference is that we've got, we've talked about New York, we've talked about Copenhagen. There's examples here in Mansfield, in the UK. There's, as I said, Living with Water. We have got SUDS popping up everywhere. We know that they work now because we've been able to monitor them for some years. And I think that's part of it as well, that we now know that they can do the job that we want them to do. And therefore, you can use that best practice that we've got now and feed it into a really contemporary SUDS manual.
Because we're here with Bentley Systems and their business is data management. Presumably, the technologies we've got to monitor what's happening to water, what's happening to the flow of water, etc. The predicting it, that is key to success.
Yeah, no, absolutely, it's key to success. And with the challenge that we've got around the change in weather patterns and the climate, with the importance of being able to take on everybody's data from all of the different stakeholders where there's those interrelationships and interdependencies, having data, knowledge and the models is fundamental. But you can't do that the way that we used to do it. So we do need to use AI and new technology and models to recreate things with digital twins that recreate something and allows us to really see what would happen once we scale it up into the real world. Hugely important.
Because one of the other recommendations in the report is it highlights the loss of green spaces in urban areas. And I suppose when you're looking at a housing target of 1.5 million, the pressure is on to get as many houses built in a smaller area as you possibly can. What kind of policy interventions are you going to be looking to hang out there for as a parliamentarian when the planning bill goes through to say, no, we need to have more roof per house?
Yeah, first and foremost, I don't think it's one or the other.
Right.
Yeah, they're not. They don't have to compete. So we have got lots of examples of new build estates that are extremely blue-green, that have lots of areas where there's rewilding, where there are blue areas, where there are small ponds that are just beautiful for the area, wonderful for biodiversity. It is just about making sure that really early in those planning considerations, and working with the developers and working with those that build it in the supply chain, that you have got those plans that build in that blue-green element. And it's as simple as that, to be honest. But it's harder when you put it into practice.
Well, just to round us up, let's talk about what success looks like. Because a fully embraced spun city principles, what over the next 10, 15, 20 years, what would you say we should expect to see if we did embrace these principles?
So I'll give you an example of Sheffield, because obviously it's close to home. It's close to Doncaster and the Isle of Axholme. They've just been announced as one of the best places to live in the UK. It was a hugely industrial area, lots of grey, and what I mean by that, lots of concrete. And over the last decade or so, they have been on the most amazing change programme where the city has very much embraced how do you adopt blue-green characteristics within that city. So how do you put in permeable paving? How do you bring water back to the city in a way that it creates amenity, but it also helps to protect the city? The trees that are there, the tree pits, the hedgerows, it just looks fantastic, but it makes it an amazing place to live and to work.
So when you look at a city like that, when you look at New York, you look at Copenhagen, what would you say are the biggest barriers to not embracing it? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a political thing? What are the barriers?
There's a few things there, isn't there? So it is about culture change, but what helps facilitate culture change is right to the heart of national government and some of the stuff that we do in terms of our policies and legislation. So there are things in there that need to be in there that help facilitate and help make that happen. But it's also just it's injecting money as well into R&D and innovation and thinking differently. But fundamentally, I read something yesterday. All of the answers that we need are already here. Most of the data, the AI, the information that we've got now will not change within the next 50 years. We just need to use it, well. We need to use it collectively, so we can pull all that data, all of the brains around into the right places. We can make the difference that we need. It is about creating that open dialogue. It's massively important.
But I suppose it's also about making sure that you're creating communities that people actually want to continue to live in.
Absolutely.
Because as you pointed out, if you're constantly getting flooded, then it does not become a great place to live.
No, not at all. No. Not at all. My view is that the work that we are feeding in as an APPG, and it is when we talk about APPGs, this really is, the ones that I chair are 100% feels very much all party as well. So, and actually it feels like a team because we've got a common endeavour and a common goal to achieve. So what I would say is you've got all of the right people around the table that will continue it into the future, but we are feeding in as a collective to Sir John Cunliffe's review. So Sir John has been to the APPG. I've had separate meetings with him as the chair. We've had a number of panel debates that we are collectively pulling that information together and we're feeding that into the review. So for me, we're trying to do everything we possibly can to make sure that we've already got a real cross-party consensus. The stuff that we're feeding in comes from all of us, and we've kind of got a north point that we're feeding into Sir John. Yeah.
And with a report like this, and I'll put a link to the report on the show notes, but if people are reading that and they want to feed back some stuff to you, how do they do that? I mean, how do they help you make that case?
No, absolutely. So quite simply, just email me. Right. That's not a problem at all. So my details are obviously on the parliamentary website. Yeah. So just go on. You can email me. We will pick it up. We'll feed those into the APPG. Good. Yeah.
Lee, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts. It is a fascinating area, and certainly the white paper has a whole lot of really interesting stuff in it and some really great recommendations. So thanks very much for sharing it with us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Great stuff. Well, certainly it's a fascinating and vitally important subject, and one that will continue to challenge both engineers and policymakers as we attempt to balance population growth, urbanisation, and of course the impacts of a changing climate. Much discussion to come, I've no doubt, but do have a read of the white paper, a link to which is in the show notes, and of course feedback your comments to Lee Pitcher and his Party Parliamentary Group on water. But sadly, that's all we have time for now, but there is more in the pipeline as we continue to probe the big issues facing the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you will find background information and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. And of course, they're all on Apple and on Spotify and all your favourite podcast hosts. But for now, thanks for joining me. Thanks again to Lee, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.